hadn't seen my brother in person since our father was admitted to hospice. We'd exchanged a couple short texts, mostly transactional, him asking about next steps, me confirming basic logistics like which hospital room Dad was in or what time the priest was coming. He never asked how I was holding up. Honestly, I never expected him to. At the funeral, he wore the same designer suit he wore to Dad's retirement party. It still fit, which irritated me in a way I didn't have time to unpack. He walked with that same shoulder-back confidence he's had since high school. You know the kind, like the world's already congratulating him for being born. He gave the eulogy, of course, not because he was asked, but because he assumed. 5 minutes in, he had already dropped the words legacy, pillar of strength, and deeply grateful. I sat there in the front row, next to our aunt, silently counting how many times he used the word I in a speech that was supposed to be about Dad. When he was done, there was polite applause, polite, at a funeral. Afterward, during a reception, he worked the room like a seasoned fundraiser, hugs, handshakes, pursed lips, and sympathetic nods. At one point, I watched him smile as he accepted condolences, then turn and whisper to his wife something that made her smirk into her wine glass. I was sipping black coffee and trying not to chew my lip raw when he finally came over to me. "Hey," he said, as if we just bumped into each other at brunch. "Holding up okay?" I nodded. It's been a day. He gave me a pat on the back, not a hug, a pat, the way you'd tap a printer to get it to work. "I've already talked to the family lawyer," he said casually. "Figured I'd get ahead of things. There's a lot to sort out, obviously." I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. "I assume Dad left the house to me," he continued, "and the portfolio stuff. He always said I had a better head for numbers." My grip tightened slightly on the coffee cup. Ceramic. White. I imagined throwing it. I didn't. Instead, I said, "You talked to the lawyer?" "Yeah, set up a meeting next week." "Huh," I replied, and took another sip. Because what he didn't know, what no one knew, not even our cousins or Dad's best friend Harold from Rotary Club, was that I had already met with the lawyer 3 weeks ago, privately, and I wasn't just a beneficiary. I was the executor, the one with the keys, the codes, the instructions, the authority. Dad had made that decision quietly months before he passed. The thing about growing up with a brother like mine is you start to see the world in 2 distinct categories: what he gets and what's left for everyone else. We weren't rich growing up, not at first, but we were stable, and in our little suburban world, stability looked a lot like success. My father owned a local contracting business, the kind that built entire neighborhoods before Home Depot came in and tried to undercut everybody. And my brother? He was the future CEO from the time he could walk. He was the golden child. I was the quiet one. He got piano lessons. I got told to be patient, honey. Next year. He got a new car on his 16th birthday. I got his old one, complete with a cracked CD player and 3 gum wrappers melted into the cup holder. He got praised for bringing home a B. I got questioned for getting an A-. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't resentful at the time. I just thought that's how things were. Like gravity, like morning breath. You don't fight it, you just live around it. But over time, those little differences stopped feeling harmless. When he crashed the family car in college, Dad covered the repairs and told everyone it was a learning experience. When I took out a student loan so I wouldn't have to burden the family, Dad said that showed initiative, but never offered to help pay it off. When my brother skipped Thanksgiving 2 years in a row for work trips, it was understandable. When I did it once for a conference, I got a passive-aggressive email about drifting away. It added up. Always him first, me second, if I was lucky. Even when Dad got sick, there was this unspoken assumption that I'd be the one to handle things. The paperwork, the meds, the logistics. My brother visited twice, maybe 3 times in the final months. Each time he brought expensive wine and left within 48 hours. But he was charming, always had been. The kind of guy who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like he remembered their birthday. He had this confident, well-tailored energy that people mistook for competence. And Dad? Dad loved that about him. Wanted to believe he'd built a son who could carry on the name, the business, the legacy. Until one tool, he realized charm wasn't the same as character. That day came sometime last spring. Dad and I were going over his accounts in the hospital, checking who was listed as power of attorney. He looked tired, really tired. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones and turns everything into effort. I want to change the executor, he said quietly. I looked up from the papers. You sure? He nodded. Your brother's never even read a will. He thinks life is a reality show, and he's the star. I didn't argue. I didn't even smile. I just said, okay, and got the paperwork started. A week later, it was official. No big announcement, no family group text, just a few signatures, notarized and sealed. The kind of quiet power move my father would have called smart business. I didn't tell anyone, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew how this family worked. If I'd said something, it would have turned into drama. Accusations, tears, denials. Suddenly, it would be about me and not Dad's actual wishes. So I waited. And my brother? He walked right into the trap of his own assumptions. After the funeral, he started making plans like he had the keys to the kingdom. I heard from a cousin that he'd already called a realtor, claimed he was just exploring options for the family home. I got a forwarded email from our uncle. My brother had pitched a joint investment opportunity using Dad's remaining stock portfolio. He hadn't seen the will, hadn't even requested it, but he'd already decided what it said. Classic. I watched all this unfold like someone watching a toddler try to open a locked door. It wasn't time to intervene yet. Not until the official reading. Not until he'd built up enough false confidence that the fall would actually teach him something. I did, however, call the estate lawyer to let him know what was happening. He's making moves? The lawyer asked, surprised. But he hasn't even seen the documents. I know, I said. And you haven't said anything? Nope. Strategic silence, the lawyer said, chuckling. I like it. I didn't tell him it wasn't really strategy. It was survival. I'd lived my whole life letting my brother talk over me, cut in line, take the biggest slice, and then blame the rest of us for being too slow. I knew how to wait. I knew how to play small, but this time I didn't have to because this time, Dad had handed me something rare and powerful. Authority. The final word. The legally binding truth. And for the first time in my life, my brother was going to have to listen. The will was in a sealed envelope with my name on it. My full name. In Dad's neat block handwriting. Uppercase letters, all evenly spaced, like he didn't trust cursive to carry this kind of weight. I had picked it up from the lawyer's office alone. No press, no entourage, just me in jeans and a jacket that still smelled like hospital rooms and coffee breath. The lawyer, Mr. Halverson, slid it across the polished wood table like it was a contract for a nuclear launch. Take your time, he said. You don't have to open it now, but I did. right there in that beige-walled office, with the dusty blinds and the antique clock that ticked like a passive-aggressive reminder of mortality. I opened it. Dad's letter wasn't emotional. It wasn't even particularly long, but it was clear. I know this will come as a surprise to your brother, but I trust you to handle things properly. You were always the one who stayed when things got messy. Use your judgment. Don't let anyone bully you into anything. There it was. The whole inheritance plan laid out in plain language, with legal teeth behind every clause. And the final line? As executor, your decisions are final. I reread it 3 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. And it scared me more than I expected, because now it wasn't just a secret, it was my responsibility. It's one thing to complain that no one trusts you. It's another to be handed a legacy and told, okay, show us why we should have. Halverson explained the rest in his usual low, measured tone. He was a steady man, the kind who probably practiced deep breathing before speaking to clients. The assets are divided evenly, he said, but the authority isn't. You're in charge of distribution, timing, enforcement. And any misuse or early withdrawals, well, that falls to you to handle. He paused. Let that sink in. There's also a clause allowing you to delay any transfers if you feel beneficiaries are acting in bad faith. I nearly choked on the sip of water I'd just taken. I can delay the entire inheritance? Yes. You won't win popularity points, but legally, yes. If someone's exploiting the estate or endangering its assets, your word is final. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the ceiling, half expecting to see cameras, like this was some elaborate prank show. But it wasn't. It was real. I left that meeting with a folder of documents, a flash drive of digitized copies, and a new level of anxiety that settled between my shoulder blades like a stone. For a few days, I did nothing, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I wanted to see what he would do. Spoiler, he did exactly what I predicted. He started moving like the king of the castle, inviting people to stay at the house for a few days, as if it were a hotel he just acquired, posting cryptic captions online like, "New chapter loading," over a picture of Dad's favorite chair. One of our cousins texted me asking if it was true. My brother had already inherited the family business, to which I replied simply, no. It didn't take long before he called me. I was washing dishes when my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Twice. On the third ring, I answered. Hey, he said, his voice all butter and business. Just checking in on the estate stuff. I said, drying my hands on a towel. I spoke with Aunt Helen, he continued. She said you might be the one managing things. That true? Might be, I said. Why? Well, just wanted to make sure we're aligned. I mean, I've got plans to liquidate a few of the minor assets. Dad had some weird junk, and I've already got a guy interested in the boat. The boat? Yeah, the bass boat. Barely used. Probably worth a good chunk. I paused. You already made a deal? No, he said quickly. Just talked numbers, nothing final. I didn't answer. The silence stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable. Finally, he said, anyway, I'll loop you in on anything big. We're a team, right? I smiled, though he couldn't see it. The kind of smile you give before you tip over a house of cards. We'll talk soon, I said, and hung up. The thing is, my brother had never asked for permission in his life. He just assumed he had it. He assumed the will backed him. Assumed Dad would never hand control to someone who didn't play golf or drive a leased Mercedes. He assumed wrong. I went into my room, pulled out the manila folder, and flipped to the clause about asset protection. It was right there in black and white. Any executor identified misuse or presumption of ownership prior to formal disbursement shall result in adjusted timelines and potential withholding of said inheritance. Which was a fancy legal way of saying, you act shady, you wait longer. And that was exactly what I planned to enforce. Because I wasn't just holding the will, I was holding the line. A week later, I met with Mr. Halverson again, this time in the early morning when the office was still quiet and smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink. He handed me a cup of something dark and bitter, and I took it like communion. Today we were making it official. He opened his laptop and pulled up the formal file. "Ready to lock it in?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was ready so much as I was done hesitating. We went line by line, confirming the estate's status, bank accounts, real estate, retirement funds, insurance, and yes, the family business. All of it frozen pending my release. I had the legal authority to begin distribution or to delay it, depending on behavior. And so far, my brother's behavior was giving delay all day. Haverson clicked through the last forms, then turned the screen toward me. "This one makes it official. You'll have full control to sign, move, block, or report any estate-related transactions." I signed it. The sound of the pen scratching on paper felt louder than it should have, like thunder in a law office. And with that signature, I stepped into the power my brother thought was already his. On my way out, I asked Halverson, "Have you told him anything yet?" Naumanen said, "You asked me to wait until the reading." "Good. Let him keep dancing." Because, oh, was he dancing? Back home, my inbox was starting to fill up with updates from my brother. He'd sent a group email to a handful of family members with the subject line, "Keeping everyone in the loop." Inside, he outlined progress on handling Dad's affairs and even used the term taking on the burden of responsibility. I nearly laughed. He detailed how he'd had early conversations with a broker about selling Dad's classic truck. He referred to it as our family's unused asset, like he hadn't once begged Dad to keep it as a nostalgic heirloom. He included a bulleted list of next steps. My favorite was possibly update interior of main house to prep for future listing, pending discussion. Pending discussion. With whom? His mirror? I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Halverson and filed a printed copy in my folder under a new tab labeled Assumptions. Let's talk about power for a second. It's not just money or authority. It's not even control. Power is patience. It's the ability to sit still while someone writes their own undoing in real time. And boy, was he writing. 2 days later, I got a text from my cousin Leah. "Hey, did your brother really give away Dad's watch collection to Rick's boys?" I blinked. I called Leah. "What did he do?" She sounded uncomfortable. "He visited Aunt Donna's place and said you both agreed to give Dad's watches to Rick's kids, that you didn't need them." Rick was Dad's old business partner's son. Nice enough. But they weren't family. I clenched my jaw. "Thanks," I said. "That wasn't approved. I'll handle it." I didn't even bother texting my brother. I went straight to documentation. I wrote it all down. Names, dates, actions, assumptions, all of it. I made copies of the will, highlighted the executor clause, created a spreadsheet of violations, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I was preparing to defend Dad's name from a man too entitled to see he was swinging at air. Then I scheduled the official reading. I chose a neutral location, a conference room at the lawyer's office, and sent out formal invites to all named parties. My brother, our aunt and uncle, Leah, Rick's dad, and even our childhood neighbor, Mrs. Feldman, who apparently made the will as a backup beneficiary for a charitable trust. Dad always loved her banana bread. My brother responded with a thumbs up emoji. No words, just a thumbs up. I knew that meant he was confident enough to show up, lean back in his chair, and wait for the moment he believed would crown him. And I was going to let him sit in that feeling, let it steep, because every confident smirk would make the reveal hit harder. At this point, the only thing left to do was wait. But while he was busy pre-celebrating, I was securing every piece of the estate. I called the bank, alerted them to hold all joint accounts pending executor clearance. I spoke with the title office and ensured that none of the property deeds could be touched without my signature. I even emailed the family's accountant and asked him to review any suspicious withdrawals over the past 60 days. He found two. My brother had already pulled a few thousand from one of Dad's business accounts, labeled it Urgent Legacy Maintenance. I forwarded that to Halverson with the note, Violation number 3. I didn't need revenge. I just needed record, because eventually there'd be a room, a table, a lawyer, and one envelope. And when it opened, he wouldn't just hear the truth, he'd feel it. The day of the will reading was colder than expected, and I couldn't decide if that was the weather or just karma getting theatrical. I showed up 10 minutes early, as always, wearing a black blazer and jeans, something that said respectable but not trying to impress you. Mr. Halverson was already setting up the conference room, a large wooden table, chairs arranged with that awkward spacing that says we don't trust you not to argue. The will, sealed again in a new envelope, sat in the center of the table like a grenade nobody wanted to admit had a pin missing. Any last-minute changes? He asked as I walked in. Nope, I said. Let it detonate. One by one, the family trickled in. Our Aunt Donna, all pearls and perfume. Uncle Charles with a folder of questions he would never get to ask. Cousin Leah, visibly bracing for drama. Rick's dad, who nodded politely but looked confused to even be included. And then came my brother. Late, of course, but not too late. Just late enough to make an entrance. He strolled in wearing a navy suit, no tie, crisp white shirt, like he was walking into a tech startup pitch meeting. His wife was glued to her phone behind him, tapping away with acrylic nails like she was writing a soap opera as it unfolded. He gave me a nod. I returned it, the way you nod to someone who's about to fall through a trap door, but doesn't know it yet. We all sat. Mr. Halverson cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming, he began. Today we'll be reading the final, legally binding version of Mr. Raymond Granger's last will and testament. This document was signed and notarized on May 4th, witnessed appropriately, and held in secured custody until now. My brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed like he was waiting to be congratulated. Mr. Halverson broke the seal and pulled out the will. He read the formal parts first. Legal names, locations, asset verification. A few people nodded. Someone sniffled. I just stared at the corner of the table, waiting for the part that mattered. Then came the pivot. And now, Halverson said, flipping a page, to the matter of executor designation and asset control. My brother sat up straighter. Here we go. Mr. Raymond Granger hereby designates his daughter, me, as the sole executor of his estate and assigns her full authority to manage, distribute, delay, or deny inheritance assets according to her discretion, provided all legal obligations are met. The silence in that room was almost satisfying. I didn't look at him. Not yet. I let the silence breathe. Let the words marinate. Halverson continued, undeterred. He further states, I trust my daughter to carry out my wishes with clarity and integrity. Any attempts to circumvent her authority will be treated as bad faith and subject to legal action. Now I looked at him, and oh, he looked wrecked. Not crying. No, not him. But his expression had shifted from confident to completely blank, like someone had yanked the power cord out of his self-esteem. His wife looked up from her phone, eyes wide. You could tell she was trying to read the room, trying to figure out how the script had flipped this hard. My brother cleared his throat. Wait, I thought. Halverson looked up. Yes? He asked.
tone painfully neutral. I thought I was. Dad told me years ago. He said I mean, I've already started. Halverson didn't blink. Unless you have legal documentation to dispute this signed testament, Mr. Granger, we must proceed. My brother turned to me, voice lower now. You knew. I tilted my head. Of course I knew. He blinked fast, like maybe the tears were there after all. And you didn't tell me? Nope. Why? Because you weren't supposed to know until now, I said, calm and even. That's how wills work. The room stayed silent. It was the kind of moment that made people glance down into their laps and pretend they were somewhere else. Anywhere else. Haverson continued reading the rest. Asset details, timelines, small bequests. Aunt Donna got her antique teacups. Uncle Charles got the coin collection. Leah, surprisingly, was given a generous cash gift for keeping the peace, which made her gasp softly. As for my brother, he still got his share. Dad hadn't disinherited him. The money was there, but I held the keys. Every dollar, every item, every signature required my approval, and now he knew it. When the reading was done, people started filtering out, awkward and half silent. I got a few sympathetic looks, one hug from Mrs. Feldman. Leah whispered, "Holy shit," as she passed me, then mouthed, "Sorry," when she remembered we were technically at a legal reading. My brother didn't move. He just sat there, shell-shocked. I stood. He finally looked up at me, eyes darker now, angrier. "You planned this," he said quietly. "No," I said. "Dad did." He stood too. "You're going to make this hard on me, aren't you?" I smiled. "Not if you stop making it hard on yourself." He stared at me for a long beat, like he wanted to say something cutting, something that would make me crumble. But he didn't. He just walked out. And when the door closed behind him, it was the first time in years I realized the house wasn't just full of his voice anymore. It was full of mine. He didn't speak to me for 3 days after the reading, which, to be fair, is record-level restraint for my brother. Normally, he prefers his outrage hot and instant. Voice raised, hands flying, guilt trips packaged with a bow. But not this time. This time, the silence hit different. Not tactical, just stunned. I was at the house when it began to unravel. Dad's house. The one my brother had mentally claimed months ago. He'd already walked through it after the funeral, talking about paint colors and turning the den into a study. I remember him tapping the walls like a real estate agent, doing a walkthrough of a property he didn't own, because in his mind, he already did. But now it was still technically Dad's, and legally, it was mine to control. The mail still came in his name. I sorted through it like I always had. Credit card statements, junk coupons, one sympathy card from an old high school friend who apparently hadn't heard the news until weeks later. And then came the email. Subject: Asset clarification needed. From my brother. I opened it, already bracing myself. I'd like to talk about the Camaro. I've already spoken with someone who wants to buy it. I figured it wouldn't be an issue since we're all on the same page about me handling the car stuff. Let me know when you want to sign off on the title. I stared at the screen. The Camaro. Dad's '68 Camaro, cherry red, vinyl seats, stick shift so sensitive it felt alive. It had been Dad's weekend ritual car, and he loved it more than some relatives. The idea that my brother would try to sell it off like a used blender, infuriating, but also on brand. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked into the garage. There it was, covered in a faded car tarp, still smelling like motor oil and good memories. I ran a hand across the hood and muttered, "He wants to sell you?" The car said nothing, but I felt judged. I called Halverson. "Hypothetically," I said, If someone tried to sell something from the estate without permission, it's not hypothetical, is it? He cut in. Nope. Do you have evidence? Yes, an email. Perfect. Save it. Screenshot it. That alone is grounds for freezing his share. I exhaled. It's a strange thing holding power over someone who spent their entire life talking over you. You expect it to feel vindictive, sweet, triumphant, but honestly, it felt exhausting. I didn't want a war. I didn't want control for the sake of control. I just wanted respect. Boundaries. The ability to manage Dad's estate with dignity. Something my brother had no idea how to spell, much less live by. Later that evening, I replied, "The Camaro is not being sold. It will remain part of the estate per Dad's wishes. Any further attempt to move assets without my approval will be documented and considered bad faith. Please direct any future questions to the lawyer." Short, sharp, legal enough to sting. I didn't expect a thank you card in return, but I also didn't expect what happened next. Because the next morning, I woke up to 7 missed calls. From cousins, from my uncle, even from Rick. Apparently, my brother had gone on a mini PR tour, telling anyone who would listen that I was abusing power, that I was freezing the family out, taking everything for myself, and dishonoring Dad's final wishes. He told Aunt Donna I changed the locks on the house, told Rick that I was keeping his rightful inheritance hostage. By lunchtime, I was the villain in a story I hadn't written. So I did what any emotionally exhausted woman with receipts would do. I printed them, all of them. The will, the email, the clauses Dad had added with laser precision, the one about asset misuse, the one about executor discretion, the one that basically said, if my son acts like an entitled child, my daughter has every right to ground him financially. Then I emailed the family. Not everyone, just the ones who'd been looped in by him. Subject, clarifying my role. Hi all, I understand there's been confusion around the estate. I'd like to clarify a few things directly. I was named sole executor by Dad, per a legally binding will. My role includes full authority over timing, distribution, and asset management. Any attempt to sell or move assets without approval is not permitted under the will. Please see attached documents for details. I'd appreciate it if future concerns were addressed calmly and factually. I understand this is an emotional time for everyone, myself included. Thanks for your understanding. Me. I hit send and stared at the screen for a while. The replies trickled in slowly. Leah sent a heart emoji and a simple, "Got it. Makes sense." Aunt Donna, to her credit, wrote, "Apologies. I didn't know the details. Thank you for clarifying." Uncle Charles sent a thumbs up. Boomers and their thumbs, man. As for my brother, silence, which weirdly was loud. Later that day, Halverson called. "He's starting to get nervous," he said. He left me a voicemail asking if there was a way to reverse the executor status. I laughed out loud. "Incredible," I said. "Let him keep swinging." "Just remember," Halverson added, "don't engage emotionally. Stick to the will. Let the paper speak." And that's what I did. Because now the paper wasn't just backing me up. It was protecting me from him, from the fallout, and from the part of me that still sometimes felt like the little sibling, waiting for approval that was never going to come. You would think, after being publicly corrected with screenshots and legal backing, my brother might have taken a breath, rethought his tactics, maybe even apologized, or at the very least, laid low. But no, instead he shifted into what I call the Cold War phase. Not open attacks anymore, but 1,000 little jabs delivered through other people. Passive-aggressive messages, selective silence, whispers wrapped in sympathy that always found their way back to me like heat-seeking missiles. It started with the group chat. Our family has one, has for years. Mostly used to trade recipes, complain about weather, and post photos of questionable casseroles. It's not exactly a battlefield, but suddenly it became one. My brother began posting photos of the house, Dad's house, with captions like, "We're thinking of redoing the kitchen in Dad's memory. Thoughts?" Or, "Planning a celebration of life dinner next week at the house. All are welcome." You can guess what wasn't included in these announcements. Me? Not a word. Not a heads up. Nothing. The kicker? He even posted a picture of the Camaro, washed and waxed, parked under the golden hour sun like it was a photo shoot for Men Who Inherit Without Permission magazine. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because behind the scenes, Halverson and I were tightening the screws. He had sent a formal notice to the estate's bank, freezing any linked accounts pending audit review. The title for the Camaro had been flagged with a legal hold. And the house? I'd filed a protective estate occupancy agreement, which meant that if anyone hosted events there without my permission, they were technically trespassing on restricted property. So while he was busy performing for likes and legacy, I was locking the doors behind him. That weekend, I got a call from Aunt Donna. Her tone was careful, like someone walking on a frozen pond. "Honey, I know this is awkward," she began, "but thought your brother says you're making it impossible to honor your father properly, that you're weaponizing the will." There it was, the emotional ambush. I took a breath and said, "Aunt Donna, have you read the will?" "I haven't seen the full thing," she admitted. "But then I'd be happy to send it to you," I interrupted, "because I'm not weaponizing anything. I'm enforcing it." She paused. I could tell she was processing that word. Enforcing. It sounded cold, maybe even cruel, but it was true. "I just don't want to see the family divided," she said quietly. "I don't either," I replied, "but I'm not the one swinging an axe and calling it a paintbrush." Silence. Then a sigh. "I see," she said. "All right, send me the will." So I did. That became my mantra, actually. Anytime someone called, questioned, or side-eyed me about why I was being so controlling, I gave the same answer. "Would you like to read the will?" It shut down 90% of the noise. Because once you see it, once you read Dad's words in black and white, you can't unsee them. You can't unhear his voice, calm and exact, making it clear who he trusted and why. Still, the backlash wore on me, not because I doubted myself, but because I wasn't used to being the bad guy. Growing up, my role was the nice one, the peacemaker, the quiet fixer. I wasn't the loudest voice at the table. I was the one cleaning the dishes, while everyone else argued about what to eat next. And now I was the woman sending cease and desist to her own brother, the one declining access to family property, the one quoting legal clauses over dinner, the one refusing to soften the truth just because it made people uncomfortable. And that shift, it cost me. Leah stopped texting as much. Aunt Donna went quiet. Even Halverson, ever the stoic lawyer, asked once during a meeting, "You holding up okay?" I said yes, but I wasn't. I was tired, bone tired. Not from the paperwork or logistics, but from the weight of holding the line while the people around me tried to bulldoze it. One night, I went to the house just to sit in Dad's chair, the big leather recliner he always called his thinking spot. I sat there in the dark with a cup of tea and no lights, just the quiet hum of the fridge in the next room. That's when I saw it. Tucked between the seat cushion and the armrest, one of those places no one thinks to check, was a folded piece of paper, not typed, handwritten. It was a note, Dad's handwriting, slanted, messy, like he wrote it quickly, like it needed to be said before time ran out. If you're reading this, I hope you know I did what I thought was best, not for fairness, for peace. I know it's a lot. I know he'll be angry. But I also know you've got the backbone I never gave you credit for. I'm proud of you, even if I didn't say it enough. Don't let him make you doubt that. Dad, I sat there with that note in my lap, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that sneaks out when your guard slips, and your heart finally has room to exhale. Dad had known this wouldn't be easy. He knew what it meant to give me the match and tell me to light the fuse. But he'd also known I could handle the fire. And that was enough to keep going. I showed up at the house the following Tuesday with my lawyer and a locksmith. No more emails, no more screenshots, just keys. If my brother wanted to make this a stage production, fine. I was done playing stagehand. The locks had to be changed, not out of revenge, but necessity. According to the estate occupancy agreement, too many unsanctioned visitors and unauthorized uses of the property meant I had grounds to protect the home until the full asset review was complete. The clause was clear. Dad had signed off on it. So while the locksmith drilled out the front door cylinder, I stood in the driveway with Halverson, arms crossed, watching the sun climb over the roof Dad used to patch himself every summer. What if he shows up while we're here? I asked. Halverson barely looked up from his clipboard. Then I remind him that the law doesn't care about hurt feelings. But he didn't show, at least not until we were wrapping up. The final click of the new lock was still echoing when I saw his car around the corner. Black SUV, windows down, music too loud for this kind of street. He pulled into the driveway like he owned it, like nothing had changed. Then he saw me, and Halverson, and the locksmith packing up. His smirk cracked. He got out of the car with the slow, deliberate pace of someone trying to control the narrative before it even started. What the hell is this? Halverson stepped forward. You've been advised by email and certified mail that the property is under restricted estate protection. You changed the locks? I did, I said calmly. You can't just... I can, I interrupted. And I did. And if you'd like to contest it, you're welcome to hire a lawyer and file a motion. But until then, you're trespassing. His jaw clenched. You're unbelievable, he muttered. You always wanted to be the victim, but now you're just a tyrant with a clipboard. I smiled. Not wide, just enough. Better than being a looter with a god complex. He turned toward Halverson, as if hoping to appeal to a higher authority. She's being unreasonable. Dad would have wanted this to be collaborative. Halverson didn't flinch. Your father appointed her executor, gave her full discretionary control, and added multiple clauses protecting her decisions. If you have an issue, we can walk through the paperwork together again. But I assure you, you won't like the view any better the second time. It was like watching a balloon deflate. Slowly, sadly. He stood there for a long second, then turned back to me. I hope you're enjoying this, he said, because you've alienated half the family, made a circus out of something that could have been peaceful, and turned Dad's legacy into a spreadsheet. That last one stung a little, but I let it pass. I didn't make this a circus, I said. You just didn't like the fact that you're not the ringmaster this time. He didn't reply. He got in the car, slammed the door, and peeled out of the driveway so fast he kicked up dust and judgment in equal measure. The locksmith, an older guy with silver eyebrows and no patience, muttered, "Well, that was dramatic," then handed me the new keys. I nodded. You have no idea. After they all left, I went back inside. The house felt quiet, not empty, not lonely, just settled. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my binder, and started writing. Every time he pushed, I documented it. Every time he lied, I attached proof. Not because I wanted to bury him, but because if he came for the estate again, I wanted to hand the court a gift-wrapped dossier of exactly how he'd played himself. And speaking of that night, I got a voicemail from him, voice strained, too even. I want to meet, just us. No lawyers, no scripts. We need to talk. I didn't reply right away. Honestly, I didn't know if I even wanted to. But curiosity is a funny thing. And somewhere, deep down, beneath the armor and eye rolls, there was still that old version of me, the one who used to follow him around the yard, who believed we were a team before we ever became a rivalry. So I agreed. Neutral territory. A quiet diner on the edge of town where the coffee is always bad, and the booths haven't changed since the 90s. I got there first. When he arrived, he looked different. Not smaller exactly, just muted, like someone had turned the volume down on his ego. He sat across from me and didn't touch his menu. I wanted to apologize, he said. I blinked. That's a first, I said. He almost smiled. Yeah, I guess it is. He stared at the table. I didn't expect this. Any of this. I assumed Dad would pick me. He did, I said softly. Until he didn't. He nodded. Guess that should have told me something. We sat in silence for a bit. The waitress refilled my water, dropped off coffee neither of us ordered, and wandered away. I miss him, he said finally. Me too. Another pause. I know I messed up, he said, but I really thought I was helping. I thought I was supposed to take charge. You were, I said, but not like that, not with lies, not with ego, not with blinders on. He nodded. Yeah, I see that now. He looked up at me. So what happens next? I shrugged. Depends on you. You stop interfering, I distribute the estate fairly. No games, no favorites, just Dad's plan. He nodded again, then said the thing I wasn't expecting. Thanks for protecting him, even from me. That cracked something. We didn't hug, didn't cry, just sat there, sipping burnt coffee, letting a decade of rivalry cool down enough to talk without burning each other. I don't know if we'll ever be close again, but I know we stopped the damage. And sometimes that's enough. It's funny how quickly the temperature of a relationship changes when the storm passes, when both people drop their weapons and realize no one's left standing but each other. After that diner meeting, my brother went quiet again. But it wasn't the same kind of silence as before. It wasn't icy or performative. It was respectful, careful. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't post any cryptic nonsense about legacy or family loyalty on Facebook. He let me do what Dad had asked me to do, in peace. The estate process moved forward faster once the resistance stopped. Haverson and I finalized the audit on the financial accounts and distributed the assets exactly as Dad had outlined. Equal shares, no shortcuts, no early grabs. Every document signed, every transfer logged. I remember the day I mailed the final check to my brother. I stood in line at the post office behind an elderly couple shipping birthday presents, and when it was finally my turn, I slid the envelope across the counter like it was radioactive. The clerk weighed it, slapped on a priority sticker, and said, "You want insurance on this?" I smiled. "Oh, it's already covered," because that check didn't just carry a number, it carried a message. Here's your piece of the legacy. And here's me doing it the right way, even when you didn't. After the estate closed officially, Halverson handed me a final packet labeled Executor Completion Report. I tucked it into my home file cabinet, right behind tax records and that one drawer of emotionally loaded birthday cards I never reread but can't throw away. That weekend, I went back to the house, Dad's house, my house, for now anyway. It looked the same, but something had changed. Maybe it was the way the shadows settled a little softer across the hallway. Maybe it was the absence of tension in the air. Maybe it was me. I made tea, sat in Dad's recliner again. I had done that a lot since he passed. Not because the chair was particularly comfortable, but because it felt like the only place I could think without performing. The envelope with Dad's handwritten note was still tucked in the side pocket. I pulled it out, read it again. Don't let him make you doubt that. I hadn't, and I wouldn't. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my brother. House looks great. Thanks for taking care of everything. I know I didn't make it easy. I stared at it for a moment, then typed, appreciate that. Dad would have wanted it this way. No emojis, no exclamation points, just facts. 10 minutes later, he replied, yeah, he would have. I'm trying to be better. That was the closest I was ever going to get to an apology. And you know what? It was enough. A few weeks later, we saw each other again at Aunt Donna's birthday brunch. No drama, no weird energy, just two people learning how to stand in the same room again without dragging 10 years of resentment behind them. He handed me a slice of cake and said, so did you end up keeping the Camaro? I grinned. Of course I did. He laughed. Yeah, that checks out. Progress. We're not best friends. We're not hugging at every reunion. But we're not swinging anymore either. We're something more honest than that. Tolerant. Trying. And if you've ever lived through a family war, you know, that's a miracle. The biggest surprise? A few days ago, I got a letter in the mail from him. Inside was a printed photo of the two of us from when we were kids. Me in pigtails, him with a bowl cut, both of us grinning wildly in the backseat of Dad's truck. On the back, he wrote, thought you might want this. You always remembered the details better than I did. I stood in the kitchen holding that photo for a long time, because he was right. I did remember the details. The way Dad used to whistle when he cooked, the creak of the garage door in the winter, the time my brother taught me to ride a bike, then let go before I was ready, and cheered when I didn't fall. I remembered the kid he used to be, and for the first time in a long time, I started to see a version of him I didn't need to protect myself from. A version that maybe, just maybe, could still be part of my story without rewriting all the pages that came before. We weren't healed, but we were no longer hurting each other. And sometimes, that's where healing starts. It's strange how quiet life gets after a storm ends. Not just outside, but inside you, too. Like your body finally stops flinching. Your mind stops scanning for attacks. And you begin to realize how much energy you spent just bracing for impact every single day. In the weeks that followed, I cleaned out the house room by room. I found old boxes of Dad's workshop notes in the garage, labeled with things like shed ideas and tools I'll never use but won't throw away. I found receipts from his first business loan, taped to the bottom of a drawer like a reminder to himself that he'd done something hard and survived. I found photos, so many photos, of him, of us, of my brother as a toddler on Dad's shoulders, of me in a fourth-grade play, wearing a crown made of gold-painted macaroni. One picture showed the four of us on a vacation I barely remembered, all sunburnt and laughing. Dad had written the words, "The good kind of chaos," on the back in thick blue marker. I sat on the living room floor with those photos around me, and for once they didn't feel heavy. They just felt real. Not a story, not a weapon, just memory. Truth, unpolished and unfiltered. There's a peace in that. The estate officially closed at the end of the month. Halverson filed the last paperwork, mailed the final statements, and emailed me a subject line I'll never forget. Job well done. That's it. No dramatic finale, no courtroom explosion. Just two people, me and a man with an excellent collection of sweater vests, doing the quiet work of ending something properly. I thanked him. He thanked me. He said most executors don't finish with grace. They finish with lawsuits. I said, well, I've had enough drama to last a decade. We laughed. And then I went home, my real home, not Dad's house, mine. It was a little place barely big enough for one person and her collection of inherited trauma. But it was mine. I put the letter Dad wrote in a frame and hung it in the hallway. Right next to that photo my brother sent, the one of us in the truck, before the years made everything more complicated than it needed to be. People ask sometimes if I regret how it went down, if I wish I'd just let my brother handle it, smoothed things over, kept the peace by giving up control. And I'll tell you what I always say, absolutely not. Because peace that depends on you being quiet when you should speak, that's not peace. That's suppression with better lighting. Dad didn't give me the will to make things easy. He gave it to me to make things right. And even though I doubted myself along the way, even though I lost sleep, lost allies, and very nearly lost my temper more than once, I honored what he asked of me. And more importantly, I honored myself. I stopped apologizing for not being loud enough, flashy enough, him enough. I didn't need to become my brother to earn respect. I just needed to stop shrinking. And once I did, everything changed. Now we talk sometimes, not every week, not with emojis and heart reacts, but real words, simple check-ins, a few memories here and there. He even called me last week to ask for advice on refinancing. I laughed and said, "You sure you don't want to take it all into your own hands again?" He laughed back, said, "I've learned my lesson," and maybe he has. Or maybe we're just both a little older now, a little more honest, a little more willing to listen instead of perform. I don't know what our future looks like. I don't know if we'll ever get back to the version of us that played hide and seek in Dad's backyard until the sun went down. But I do know this. The legacy I protected, it wasn't just Dad's. It was mine too. And no one can take that from me. Not anymore. And so we come to the end of this story, quietly, gently, like the way grief turns into memory over time. No explosions, no courtroom battles, just a daughter who followed her father's wishes, even when it hurt, even when it cost her more than anyone will ever know. Tonight, I want you to rest in the soft truth of this. Not all victories are loud. Some are made in the slow decision to keep showing up, to hold your ground when the wind blows sideways, to say this is mine to carry, and then carry it with grace. If you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one expected to give way for peace, you're not alone. And I hope this story reminds you that power doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like clarity, like a calm voice reading the will, like a daughter saying no, not because she wants control, but because she's finally ready to stop being controlled. Take a deep breath now. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of other people's expectations slide quietly off your back. You are allowed to protect what matters. You are allowed to write your version of peace. And maybe, just maybe, that's what legacy really is. Not what we leave behind, but how we choose to leave it.